Alright, everybody, hello and welcome. As always, I'm Sean. This is the Reserve Team and another episode of Reserve Team Rankings. We've got a huge topic today. We are starting what's going to be a long-running series on the channel, our all-time list for best players in and around the A-League itself, and we're starting at the back with the custodians, the goalkeepers. Now, the way that we've set this up is we've got two nominees from each A-League club. That's any A-League club throughout the history of the A-League itself, so there are some players in there that you might be surprised to see in the discussion relating to the all-time best goalkeeper in the A-League. Thankfully, I'm not on my own though. I don't have to make this one up by myself. I'm joined by Reserve Team collaborator Stephen Paletti. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me again, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Since we're talking about goalies, I figured it was best to wear the jersey of a goalie, so I am currently wearing the number 29 for Marc-Andre Fleury of the Vegas Golden Knights, since I can't actually find the one Sydney FC keeper's jersey I owned before they stopped making them. Damn you, Sydney. Make more keeper jerseys.
I know. We'll hit up Under Armour on Twitter after this, and we'll see if we can't get you hooked up by the time we come back. So, Stephen, the way we're going to work this is, and you haven't been on this show before, but you have been on the channel before, and you may have seen the content, is that each week we set up 4 different tiers. Because this is an all-time A-League goalkeeper discussion, I've adjusted it a little bit. We've still got our all-star category at the top. We've still got get in the bin at the bottom. But in the middle, I've gone with very good and decent. Obviously, with the all-time A-League goalkeeper discussion, we really are talking about some very good players at the very top end of the scale. There will be some people that we throw in the bin, but that's just, more to fill out the content than anything else. So I have changed those from the needs improvement categories and the decent categories that we usually have, just to help give us that separation between like the tippity top of the best players we've ever seen at that position and other players that are very good but perhaps don't have the accolades. In addition to that, I've also put together our ranking rules. These are our fallbacks. If we can't immediately talking through a player or looking at their career history decide where they sit in the league and in the division itself, we've got these to fall back on. So the first one is the quality for the player themselves, their club contribution, their league contribution, and then the cabinet, which is basically their trophy cabinet. Not all those trophies will be like, A-League titles and things like that. Some of them might be individual awards, of which I've put a list together for each of the players that we're going to go through today. Australia does have a really good record of producing goalkeepers, both in the A-League and internationally as well. It's not a position that we often see filled by like a marquee or visa player because there is good depth at the A-League position, at the goalkeeper position throughout the course of the A-League. What are some of your thoughts on your favourite keepers throughout the first, 15, 16 seasons of the A-League itself? And what sort of things do you think we might see in our tier list today?
So I think what we're going to see is, unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of get in the bins just because the talent level hasn't quite been there for a lot of clubs. It's been a lot of one player for many seasons. There's been a lot of rotation amongst some of the clubs. Look at someone who's going to rank very highly on this list, Liam Reddy. As 8 different clubs he's been at in the A-League, 7 or 8. So there's been a lot of rotation, and I know the A-League cops a lot of flack as a recycle league, but it seems to be most prevalent at the keeper position for a lot of clubs. But that's part of football. There's a lot of teams that go through a lot of keepers every year because either different coaches come in, some keepers have a bad year, and a bad season or two can be disguised at other positions to an extent, but not so much at the goalkeeper position just because they're on all the highlight reels, usually in the wrong circumstances.
Yeah, there are a few goalkeepers as well on here that we've nominated because they're from a particular club, but they have played at, a few different teams. I think Liam Reddy might be the only player in the league that doesn't want expansion because he was so close to completing the set of A-League clubs. But now we've, of course, added MacArthur and we've added Western United, so I don't think he's going to get there, given that he is getting pretty well into his 30s at this point. But if you're happy to start and get going, we might start firing through some of these names. So the early clubs that we're going to go for are New Zealand Knights, North Queensland Fury, Gold Coast United. Obviously don't exist anymore. They had limited keepers available in their limited seasons. So there are a few that aren't necessarily as high quality as the others on the list. The first one is the one that you can see on your screen at the moment, Danny Milosevic. He actually had an okay career in Europe. He was an ex-Leeds United academy player. He was at Celtic on a pay-as-you-play contract, never made an appearance for them. And when he left Celtic, he left Glasgow, returned to Auckland, and was the New Zealand Knights' initial keeper in their early seasons. I don't know how much you know, Stephen, of the New Zealand Knights. They were absolutely horrific. And And Danny Milosevic, to be fair to him, and I think he'd even admit this, didn't have the best start to his career in the A-League. He did make 19 appearances over that first season before eventually being replaced by another goalkeeper, who we'll talk about further in a few days, weeks and months. Do you remember Danny Milosevic at all, or do you know much about him? And where would you position him on the list?
To be perfectly honest, given that my introduction to the A-League was around 15-16, I don't know a lot about, about the New Zealand Knights, about North Queensland Fury, apart from small discussions here and there about their historical context. So there's not a whole lot I can add to it. Those 19 appearances, there was 42 goals conceded and 3 clean sheets. So, pretty. Just looking at the stats, a pretty bang average goalie. Conceding 2.5, 3 goals a game. So I don't really have much to add there.
No, it's absolutely fine. Look, you didn't miss a tremendous amount with the New Zealand Knights. They didn't bring a whole lot to the league other than a guaranteed 3 points for most of the other clubs in the division. So I think it sucks always starting at the bottom, but we've got to start somewhere. So I think Danny Milosevic goes in the bin. Not necessarily reflective of his entire career or him as a person or anything like that, but definitely not the best A-League career and certainly nowhere near the discussion in terms of the all-time greats in the division itself. He does bring us to another goalkeeper that was also a part of New Zealand Knights. They didn't have the best pickings to draw from, but it's Michael Turnbull, perhaps more famous as being a Bachelor contestant that lied about playing for the Socceroos back in, I think, 2017 or 2018 or something like that. He actually is a premiership winner and a championship winner as the third choice goalkeeper for Melbourne Victory in the 2014-2015 season. So he does have that to his bow. His time at New Zealand Knights was relatively limited. He was brought in and eventually challenged Danny Milosevic for that starting role. Do you remember him from The Bachelor or anything like that? That's probably where he's more noteworthy than his actual A-League career.
Reality TV is also not my forte either. But I mean, lying about being a former Socceroo, is this one time we can be grateful that mainstream media doesn't actually give a damn about football?
Yeah, it's very true. So 90% of what actually happened, I don't really follow The Bachelor at all, but I just remember the clip coming out of him saying that he was an Australian international, and I think he did make appearances for the Australian under-20 side, but it was just soccer Twitter absolutely tearing him apart for about 3 weeks after that. So I've included him mainly so that we can have the pleasure of throwing him in the bin, and he can sit right down at the bottom of that group at the moment, behind Milosevic and a few of the others that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, jumping forward,
can we also throw the Bachelor in the bin?
Yeah, we can throw the Bachelor just as a show. That's a whole other tier list that we'll probably put on a second channel. But yeah, we can definitely go through and get rid of some of those trashy reality TV shows. Jumping forward now to North Queensland Fury, again in their limited 2 seasons in the competition. They didn't have that many goalkeepers, but the one that made the most appearance was Justin Passfield, who you can see here with his glorious handlebar mustache. 39 appearances for North Queensland, did eventually make a move to the Central Coast as well. Didn't have the best career in North Queensland, obviously not playing particularly well in their limited time in the division. Again, maybe you don't necessarily know this one, so I'll give you a little bit of a nudge. I would put him in the bin also, but he was a capable keeper and he did go on and, play at other clubs in the division as well. So maybe we put him at the top of the get in the bin category for now, just because of the higher quality of some of the players that I think we're going to get to in a moment.
Yeah, well, you look at it, 53 league appearances, 39 for North Queensland, 14 for the Central Coast, 86 goals conceded, but there are 8 clean sheets in there, so someone who's relatively capable, and it is what it is.
Exactly. And, we're getting these ones out of the way early just to help build a base that we're going to then put the roof on later with some of the top-tier talent that we'll discuss in a little bit. Next one up, Sebastian Usire, who was actually a decent, promising goalkeeper. Made 4 North Queensland appearances as a 19-year-old. That did get him a move to Blackburn Rovers over in the UK. Didn't do terribly, actually. He has 2 clean sheets for his 4 appearances, which isn't horrific. But I think also at the same time, another get in the bin category. He's definitely not anywhere near the discussion as the greatest of all time. We've got a whole bunch of other keepers coming down on this list that I think are going to be better positioned and better placed. But, still, we've got to include him. We want to get representation for all the A-League clubs and hopefully North Queensland fans. If there was someone better that we should have nominated, by all means, let us know in the comment section below. Jumping forward now to Gold Coast United, of course, the other expansion side from that period. They had a couple of different players. The first one that I've brought up here is Jess Van Straten, who you may recognise, he is a long-standing goalkeeping coach in and around the A-League. He's been at Central Coast and Newcastle and now Melbourne City. He was a Juventus Academy prospect. He came through that group and that academy for quite a while. Spent a few seasons there. I think he actually made like 1 or 2 first-team appearances for Juventus in cup competitions. Made 18 Gold Coast United appearances before eventually losing his position to Glenn Moss, and then 3 appearances for the Central Coast Mariners. Do you have any recollection of Jess Van Straten at all?
I do not. There's 21 goals in those 21 appearances, 7 clean sheets, so relatively tidy at the back. Is why he spent so long in Italy, although through teams such as Verona, Juventus, you already mentioned. Even though the appearances count was very low, he was always in and around the team and learning and getting experience on the training park, just never really being able to crack into the first teams, apart from through injury or rest.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll fire through some of these ones quickly because they're not necessarily... We're just filling them in to try and get all the teams represented and get the discussion going. But I think he also goes in the get in the bin category. I'll put him behind Passfield because he was a first-choice goalkeeper in the initial season of Gold Coast where they did well and finished third in the division for the majority of the year. The next one is perhaps a little bit more of a cult hero than an actual, star goalkeeper in the division. Jared Tyson did play for the Gold Coast 15 times and 9 appearances for Western Sydney Wanderers as well. He's Hobart's greatest export. I think he has the most of any player from Hobart and potentially Tasmania. Nathaniel Atkinson might have just overtaken him. Jeremy Walker was another young player from Tassie as well. And I think Josh Hope, prior to his retirement, was also one of the Tasmanian players that made the league itself. He's very well liked. I think Western Sydney fans were a big rap for him. I think Gold Coast were a big rap for him. But again, like an A-League career that only spanned 24 seasons, and he has had a long career in the NPL, probably puts him down in the get in the big category as well. I'll put him alongside Justin Passfield, just as a player that actually did play and was well regarded by the group, but definitely not towards the top of the discussions. And then the next one I'm going to throw in there as well at the same time is Nick Suman, who was a part of Western Sydney, made 5 appearances for that side. He's the current backup goalkeeper at expansion side MacArthur FC. So we haven't seen any appearances from him at MacArthur just yet. Looks to be a decent use prospect, but I think given his age and given how much that he's probably unlikely to play this season, given the guy we're going to talk about in a moment, we'll probably drop him down in the bin category as well, maybe just ahead of Jess Van Straten because he does have time on his side. Now this one is going to be the first real interesting one that I think we can have a discussion about. It is Adam Federici. He is of course a 16 cap Australian international, had a long career at Bournemouth and Stoke over in the English Premier League and English Championship, including Premier League appearances. He's the current starting MacArthur goalkeeper, and full disclosure, you may disagree, Stephen, being in Sydney and a Sydney FC fan, this guy is already for me, I think, one of the best keepers in the division. I think he's going to probably blow a few minds this season with how good he actually is. But we are judging this on the best A-League goalkeeper of all time, not the best goalkeeper based on their previous playing history. Where do you think, based on that, we should position someone like Adam Federici, who to this point doesn't have any appearances in the A-League itself?
I mean, you have to look at his history. 35 years old. Concedes an average of 1.33 goals a game, 81 clean sheets, 288 games. When conceding a goal, it's an average of 1.85 goals. So a very, very solid keeper. A lot of appearances in and around the English top flights, the Premier League Championship, League One that you already mentioned. I definitely think he's going to be a solid goalkeeper and he's going to be a joy to watch. This one could be tough. It's tough to rank him given he hasn't actually made any A-League appearances yet, but I think putting him in the bin's a little bit too harsh just because of that vast history he's got. I'd say we're putting I'd say just above the bin.
I'd say a good shout for decent. Like, he's a decent goalkeeper. He's got that pedigree. Hasn't done enough in the A-League to put him any higher up the list than that. And if we do put other keepers in decent, because he hasn't made any appearances, maybe he stays at the bottom of decent. But yeah, I agree. I think getting the bin would be a little bit harsh for him. Now make a jump across to Western United, who've also just had one season in the division, so limited availability of players there. This is their backup goalkeeper, Jack. I actually have to double check his name here because I don't want to do it. It's Ryan Scott, not Jack Scott. Current backup goalkeeper. He has one Western United appearance, and by all accounts, seems like a very good dude. We did our season preview for Western United earlier this week, and everyone was a big rap for him. He had a hilarious press conference during last season where he just kind of came out and started answering random questions from the press, which was fantastic to see. So seems like a good character and a good dude. I'm not necessarily convinced that one appearance is all that fantastic, but we've set a precedent now, I think, with Federici. We might throw him in the decent category just because, again, time's on his side. He could eventually make more appearances and get involved a little bit more. Have you got anything that you'd want to add? Maybe a case to put him a little bit lower and get in the bin category? I'm happy to adjust based on your preference.
No, I think decent is where he belongs. I had 4 appearances for Burnley in the FFA. For Bentley, not Burnley. Getting my B's confused there. In the FFA Cup, and conceded just 3 goals in those appearances. 3 of those clean sheets. So, one game, 3 goals conceded in the FFA Cup is not the worst thing in the world. I don't know who he played in that game, but if it was an A-League team, there's not necessarily any sort of surprise. So it's a good, solid young prospect that, depending on what happens with the player we're going to talk about next in Philip Curto, could start to develop a solid career as a Western United player and maybe in the league as a whole if another team picks him up at the end of the season.
Yeah, there's a couple of players that we'll talk about in this list that are, like prospects. If we come back in 5-10 years' time, who knows where they're going to sit in it if they stay in and around the league. But I think decent is probably the highest that we could put him at the moment. And you did mention him, the next goalkeeper, the starting goalkeeper at Western United, Philip Curto, the Polish 30-year-old, has been in the division now for a couple of seasons. He was the A-League goalkeeper of the year when in his time at Wellington Phoenix in 2018-2019 and made the team of the year that same season, impressing quite a bit in one season in Wellington before jumping across to Western United. This will be a 3rd season in the A-League. What are some of your thoughts on Philip Curto, and where do you think we would position him in a list of the overall keepers in the league?
I like Curto. I think he's a good goalkeeper to watch. He's got a couple of superstitions, which always make for fun to watch, diving for the ball well after it's gone over the crossbar. His the statistics would suggest something a little bit ordinary, but we know that's anything but actually watching him play. There's 53 appearances, including finals, 76 goals conceded, 12 clean sheets. So the clean sheets number is high, but when he concedes, he does tend to concede around that 1.5 to 2 goals mark. As far as the ranking goes, I'd say decent is where to put him at the moment. I think right at the top of the decent list.
I think decent's a good shout. I could also see potential for him being very good. There is, and future spoilers, I always tell you not to do it, and then I'm a hypocrite and do it myself. But I think there's quite a few keepers that are probably sitting in this very good all-star category. So I'm not entirely sure how he's going to compare with them. Maybe we'll put him at the top of decent for now, and then at the end when we recap each of our tiers, if there's anyone that jumps out of this that we've not been consistent with, or as we have discussions about other goalkeepers in the division, they sit a bit higher, maybe Curto's someone that we come back and look at, because even though there aren't that many goalkeepers that have won the goalkeeper of the year and the team of the year, they are his only accolades. He hasn't won any trophies within the division itself, and there are keepers that we're going to talk about that have potentially done that previously. Next up is our current starting goalkeeper for Western Sydney Wanderers, Daniel Lopar. The Swiss international has been at the club now in his 2nd season, I believe. I'm happy to be corrected in the comments below. Let me know. But it's good that they've retained him for this year. I think he signed a new contract to take him through to 2022. Seems to be well liked by the Western Sydney faithful. Had some huge performances, unfortunately, against your side, Sydney FC, last season. What are some of your thoughts on Daniel Lopar, and where do you think he's positioned as far as goalkeepers are concerned?
I think he's a good, solid keeper. Trying to look at it from a neutral standpoint is always hard when it comes to some of the Wanderers, but there's a reason that Wanderers went out and signed him from the Swiss League. He's quite solid. 20 appearances in his debut season, only 28 goals, 3 clean sheets. Didn't return post-COVID, but as you mentioned, he is signed till the end of the 21-22 season. Or maybe midway through, depending on how the calendar looks. I think he's going to be a solid keeper here in the A-League. I'd say decent.
Yeah, I think decent. Probably just behind Curto, but above Federici, just because he has played the more
Yep.
games in the division. It will be interesting to see how it plays out for him. This photo that is up, I think that is him having just returned to training with Western Sydney. So good to see him back in the country and in the league. We do want to keep as many of our promising internationals in the division as humanly possible. Does take us to perhaps, the biggest keeper that I think we've seen thus far or spoken about thus far, Ante Kovic. He did play for both Newcastle and for Western Sydney in the A-League itself, and a brief spell at Perth towards the end of his career. He was the A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2012-2013, made the Team of the Year that same season, had the most clean sheets in the division in 2013-2014. He was a champion in 2007-2008 in his initial run at Newcastle, a premier in 2012-2013 with Western Sydney Wanderers, an AFC Champions League winner in 2014, and the trophy that you can see him holding right there is an AFC Champions League MVP in 2014, the only Australian to ever win that award. I know this one's going to be tough for you, Stephen, and of course we try and be as unbiased as possible and then fail miserably every single week at the reserve team. But Ante Kovic, obviously a phenomenal goalkeeper, and I think he was tremendously important to Western Sydney's Champions League run. What are some of your thoughts on him as a player and where we would position him on this list?
I think as a player, given that most of what I've seen of him is highlights, I'd say is very solid. Every time you listen to someone talk about him, they always talk about him with praise. People who saw him at the peak of his career. It was 162 appearances in Australian competitions post the NSL era, 215 goals, 49 clean sheets. So definitely a solid shout. Being part of that Asian Champions League winning squad for the Wanderers, the only Australian team to do it, he's got to go straight to the top of the list.
So I agree. I think he's in the All-Star category. I don't think he's the top of the All-Star category because I think as worthy as that Champions League triumph is, and we will include those accolades because it was during his time in the A-League and as an A-League side, I think there's some other players that perhaps when we look at our ranking system that contributed more to the league and contributed more to their club. So I think All-Star's fine to sit him in now, and we might have a discussion in a little bit as to where he sits amongst that All-Star category. But I think he's the first inductee.
Yep, sorry, I completely agree. What I meant, he deserves to go straight to the top of the list right now. I don't expect him to stay there, given some of the players that we're going to look at. But as far as it is right now, he's at the top of the list based on who we've covered so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping forward to the Melbourne City nominees, a little bit tougher to pick this one. The Melbourne Heart era had a couple of players that we will talk about later during some of the other clubs due to multiple keepers making appearances for multiple clubs. Tom Glover had 4 Central Coast appearances as a teenager on loan from Tottenham coming through their youth academy. 15 Melbourne City appearances after taking control of the first team jersey last season. Was pretty decent in that time, a good run and a phenomenal performance in the run to the grand final, and some might say one of the better players on the pitch in the grand final last season. Youngest current starting goalkeeper in the A-League by a good couple of years, and the current Olyrood goalkeeper. I would probably put Tom Glover in the same category that we've already spoken about for the likes of Ryan Scott, about someone that maybe in 5-10 years we come back and talk about in more glowing regard. But from an outsider's perspective, I have to acknowledge my Melbourne City bias. What do you think about Tom Glover, and where do you think we position him on this list?
I think that Glover is a solid young prospect. He's still developing as a player. If he keeps going on the current trajectory that he seems to look like he's going on, and chooses Australia over England, I expect him to be the future heir of Matt Ryan, just because he's got that strong, solid base and he does have a lot of time on his side. There's a reason he comes from the Tottenham Academy. They obviously saw something in him, and he's moved over here to the A-League full time. If he keeps on this trajectory, again, as I said, future Socceroo, and I expect him to start to see him back in Europe in a few years' time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest compliment you can give him. Like, he's probably, if he continues performing as he has been, he's probably a bit better than the A-League. I think the big thing that he's doing quite well at the moment, as a young goalkeeper particularly, is he's getting himself game time. And there's probably quite a few good young goalkeeping prospects across both the A-League and internationally as well that just aren't getting that starting football. So I think he is probably touted as our highest prospect because of that. I'm going to put him in the decent category, probably just ahead of Federici. Not necessarily reflective of ability, just where they're at in their careers. Federici about to make his debut in the A-League, but a long career in Europe. Tom Glover just establishing himself as one of the better young stoppers in the league itself, but I don't think we can put him any higher than that, and I say that as a Melbourne City fan. The next one, though... the next one I'd probably do have to maybe zip my lip a little bit relating to my bias. It's Thomas Sorensen. The Danish international came across to Melbourne after a long career in the English Premier League and Championship with teams like Aston Villa and Stoke as well. Long-running theory, actually, with Stoke goalkeepers making their way to Australia at some point. He was, for me, absolutely magnificent during his time at the league itself. He did win the A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2015 and 2016, also made the Team of the Year that division. His one trophy is the FFA Cup win in 2016, of which he was the starting goalkeeper in that final against Sydney. What were some of your thoughts on Thomas Sorensen as a player? And actually, before I let you go, one of the best things about this, and I love seeing it, and we will talk about it more in future weeks as we cover some of the other positions, is he's an international player that actually stayed in Australia at the end of his career. His kids go to school here. He's doing some punditry work for both Optus Sport and for Melbourne City's pre-game show on the Facebook pages and social media. Always fantastic to see international players hanging around the league after the end of their career. So hopefully we'll see him on the sidelines as a goalkeeping coach or something like that in the future as well. But Stephen, what are your thoughts on Thomas Sorensen and where we position him on the list?
You've said it all. He spent such a long career in the Premier League. Came to Australia at the end of his career. 37 appearances for Melbourne City, 56 goals, 6 clean sheets. As far as pure talent goes, he's one of the best keepers the league has seen. The only thing that'll go against him here is his lack of longevity in the league, but that's because he came towards the end of his career. The fact he's stayed in Australia has done wonders. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that over the coming seasons as some more people who have either fallen in love with the Australian lifestyle wind up their careers that were on visa spots. Ninkovic is one of them. He loves it here. I think Lafondra falls into that category as well, even though he's currently at Mumbai City. Sorry to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'll bring it back. He said he got a very good Sydney tattoo not long before he left, so he clearly holds Sydney and Australia as a whole in high regard, and so I expect to see him back towards the end of his career. I think that as we see more players wind down their careers, we'll see more of them stay in Australia, particularly with places like Optus Sport providing opportunities for punditry.
Yeah, I mean, don't ever apologise for going off on tangents, because that's the fuel that drives the reserve team engine as far as this channel is concerned. So it is great to see, and we do want to hope that players do. I think the lifestyle and the quality of life is one of the big drawing cards of the A-League that perhaps doesn't get spoken about enough when it comes to international recruitment. I would suggest, and by all means, correct me if you disagree, I would suggest maybe we put up Thomas Sorensen into the very good category, and I think given that they were both at different points goalkeeper of the year, maybe we put Philip Curto next to him for now, and then we can maybe review who else sits in that category towards the end, because I don't think anywhere near all-star by any stretch, even though his actual ability as a goalkeeper was great. I don't think he did some of the things that we've asked in the ranking rules. Quality's there, but club contribution, he was only here for 2.5 seasons. Did lose his starting spot before he retired. League contribution, not that great, just the one FFA Cup win, and the cabinet, of course, not filled with A-League trophies or honours. But maybe that tier, that very good tier, we start looking at some of the guys that win Goalkeeper of the Year, and if they're not in the All-Star category, that's the right spot to maybe sit them in. But we'll keep firing through, and we'll see how we feel after that. Jumping across...
I agree with that.
Jumping across to the Wellington Phoenix. First man up is Glenn Moss. He did have a long career in the A-League with the Phoenix, with Melbourne Victory, with Gold Coast United, with Newcastle Jets towards the back end of his career. Made most of his appearances, though, for Wellington, which is where we've nominated him for. He was a substitute, the backup goalkeeper in the 2010-2011 Team of the Year during his time at the Gold Coast. He's the 5th player in the all-time clean sheets record for the A-League itself, and 29 New Zealand national team appearances, all while playing in the Hyundai A-League. What were some of your thoughts on Glenn Moss? He did recently retire last season. Where do you think he positions in a list such as this one?
I think he goes into the very good category. Not quite that that all-star status through no fault of his own. Some of the teams he played for just didn't have success during the time he played for them, and that's through no fault of his own. He's going to go down as one of the Kiwis' greatest goalkeepers. Is a very solid and reliable player. Playing out the final years of his career with the Jets, and it was very nice of Carl Robinson to give him the chance of that send off. In the last game of the season, there's a lot of foreign coaches probably wouldn't have done that. So full credit to Carl there. That was definitely an enjoyable moment to watch. So I think he goes in the very good category.
Yeah, and I think that final appearance took him to 250 appearances in the league, which is good. So he got to hit that milestone as well before his career and the curtain came down. The other Wellington Phoenix goalkeeper that we've nominated is Mark Paston, who was the inaugural goalkeeper for Wellington Phoenix in the early seasons. He was previously at New Zealand Knights as well. He was a full New Zealand international throughout the course of that time, including an appearance at the 2010 World Cup, where New Zealand actually went undefeated. They didn't make it out of the group, but they drew all 3 of their group stage games. 36 full New Zealand international appearances during that time. He was the number 1 ahead of Glenn Moss for the New Zealand national team during the peak of his career. 82 appearances in the league all up. Not that many clean sheets, to be completely honest, for New Zealand Knights. Quite a few, though, for Wellington Phoenix. Do you have any memories of Mark Paston and where he sat, both in terms of the division itself and his overall standing in terms of this list as well?
I do not. You mentioned 82 appearances, 118 goals, 22 clean sheets. Retired at the end of the 2013-14 season, which allowed Glenn Moss to step up and, go on to better things for the last few years of his career. I think he belongs to the decent category just based on stats alone, given that my memory isn't too crash hot.
I would make a case for him to be maybe just ahead of Glenn Moss in very good. I think when they were both in the division, and he's not that much older than Glenn Moss. He retired a little bit young for a goalkeeper, but I think he was very, very good. There was a period where Wellington Phoenix were kind of a top 4 side, and they were a top 4 side built on the quality of their defence. They had like Ben Sigmund and Andrew Durante and Manny Muscat and a few other players as well that were very good as a defensive unit, and he kind of drove a lot of that sitting behind them. So I would say he was a very, very good goalkeeper in the division. His longevity in the division also deserves credit as well. He was here for a full 7 or 8 seasons. So I'd put him there, but maybe we'll come back at the end and we'll have a talk about the 2 Wellington keepers and where we think they're positioned. I think they sit nicely together in terms of their contributions to the league itself, given that Glenn Moss had more clubs and more time in the league, but was a backup more often. And Mark Paston, really, for the entirety of his career in the A-League itself, was the first choice goalkeeper and at the same time first choice goalkeeper for the New Zealand national side. So let's throw them together for now. We might loop back on that one.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm happy for that. Again, I'm just given I don't have much memory, given my relative newness to the A-League. I'm looking at it simply from a stats perspective, but I'm by no means the be-all, end-all expert on some of these older players. So I'm happy for the case to be made, and it's something that I should say I have no control over because it's something I'm not familiar with. The numbers always tell the truth. The numbers don't always lie, but they don't always tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm happy to walk you through it. It just makes me feel like an old man when I think back to like the inaugural season of the A-League and all that sort of stuff. But, that's such as time. Time flies, and we'll catch up, I'm sure, on the modern era where you can bring a little bit more to it as well. Speaking of the modern era, a man probably near and dear to your heart, tremendous beard on the screen at the moment, Andrew Redmayne, had a long, long career in the A-League, despite still being, I think, about 30 years of age. Was initially with Brisbane Roar in their youth academy, was at Central Coast for a little bit, Melbourne Heart as backup goalkeeper during their inaugural seasons, Western Sydney Wanderers, now with Sydney FC, where he's probably enduring his best spell in the division itself. The A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2019-2020, substitute goalkeeper in the Team of the Year in 17-18, most clean sheets in the division in that 2017-2018 season. He's won premierships and championships with Sydney FC. I think he has 2 of each as things currently stand. Obviously acknowledging your bias, but I think you do give us a good perspective on how he's viewed within the Sydney FC fans and community. Where would you position Andrew Redmayne, and what are some of the thoughts on him as a goalkeeper at your club?
Okay, so 31 years old. He's been at multiple clubs, you already mentioned. Never quite found his stride, and to be honest, looked absolutely shocking before arriving at Sydney as part of that Wanderers squad. Through no fault of his own, found his way to Sydney, which was more focused on getting Janjetovic out of Sydney, as opposed to wanting to bring Redmayne in. And since arriving at Sydney from that 17-18 season, has looked absolutely fantastic. Being reunited with John Crawley, was able to just give him that spark. Crawley now with the national team, obviously. I guess he had that one appearance in 16-17 when Danny Vukovic was so dominant, just simply because of that national team call up. But yeah, since taking the job full time in 17-18, I will admit that I and a lot of Sydney fans were hesitant at first about Redmayne taking the gig full time. I guess you could say relative inexperience and his questionable ability, but ever since taking over, he's shown that he's going to become an integral part of the Sydney squad for as long as he wants to be.
I think this is the outside perspective, right? And I watched him for years at Melbourne Heart when he was the first choice goalkeeper, when we had him and Tando Valafi at the same time, that were kind of both vying for that starting position. And he was pretty rough. And he was pretty rough at Western Sydney. I think he's showing, yes, goalkeepers get better, and he is in that kind of prime period as a goalkeeper at 31, as you mentioned, but I think he's quite fortunate to be in a very good team. And I think if you dropped him in some other teams in the division, he would probably show as not being the best goalkeeper of the year. There are things that frustrate me, and I'll vent this because otherwise we'll copy it in the comment section below. There's no reason this man should have an international appearance. Like, there's none at all, other than the fact of his affiliation with Sydney FC and, as you mentioned, John Crawley and Graham Arnold. So I think the fact that he's won the A-League Goalkeeper of the Year means we kind of have to put him alongside the likes of Thomas Sorensen and Philip Curto, but I think he's at the bottom of that three. I think we'd put him smack bang in the middle of very good as things currently stand, just based on us being consistent in the way we've delivered it. Truth be told, I think if we're going just on that ability of the goalkeeper themselves, he's probably in that decent category and not really any higher. But where do you think about the middle of very good?
Oh, I think that's an appropriate place for him. If he had have gone to another club instead of Sydney, I don't think we're having this discussion. It was being reunited with John Crawley that really helped him. That Sydney bias that everyone loves to play off resulted in that Socceroos appearance against Korea. It is what it is.
He's very well regarded as being like a good guy around the league. I know he did both the Melbourne Heart and I think he did the Melbourne City fan podcast and stuff to talk about his experiences. So he's very accessible and a nice dude. I think we can kind of categorically say, probably a nice guy, probably well liked, and that's why he does get some of these opportunities. But in terms of just pure goalkeeping ability, I don't think we can put him any higher than where he currently sits. But I think that's a good spot for him. Another interesting one, the other nominee that we've gone for Sydney FC is this man, Clint Bolton, who was the inaugural goalkeeper for Sydney FC in the first season of the A-League itself. Did have 2 spells at Sydney FC. He also made a jump over to Melbourne Heart during his career as well. He was the A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2005-2006, the inaugural A-League season. He was a substitute in the Team of the Year in the 2011-2012 year with Heart. He has 4 Australian national team appearances. He was a champion with Sydney FC in 2005-2006 and 2009-2010, as well as a Premier in 2010. Led the league in clean sheets in 2007-2008 and 2009-2010, and still, despite retiring about 6 years ago, 6th in the all-time clean sheets records as far as the league itself is concerned. Do you have many memories of Clint Bolton? Is probably before your time following the division itself, but he's still relatively prominent. I'm sure you see him on a lot of highlights packages when you see Sydney FC's highlights package from those inaugural seasons in the league itself. A very, very good goalkeeper during his time.
Yep, I've heard nothing but great things about Clint Bolton. It's a lot of highlights packages, and you go back and watch some of those older games. He's always a standout. This might be showing my relative youngness here. He produced one of the best A-League gifts in history with the shrug after certain Kevin Muscat hit the post in the grand final. That's definitely I'd say one of his long-standing highlights from a non-goalkeeping perspective.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember the context around that. Kevin Muscat scored like 16 or 17 straight penalties until that one. And I don't think, like, I know it kind of goes down as like a missed penalty, but I don't think Clint Bolton gets too much credit for it. But yeah, fantastic gift contribution. We talk about the A-League being the meme league, and he's definitely chipped in there as well. I would suggest putting him at the top of the very good category, because I do think he is very good. Maybe he's someone to revisit and compare the achievements of the top guys. But just on the cusp of that all-star piece without necessarily being right there at the tippy top. Those early seasons of the A-League, it's a little bit easier and a little bit clearer a differential line between like the best players in the division and the not so great players in the division. Maybe a little bit harsh. And maybe he's one that we'll talk about again further at the end once we look at what the All-Star tier eventually looks like. But I didn't think there are still a few keepers to come that had, potentially longer periods in the league and potentially better periods in the league other than those inaugural seasons. The next one, and full disclosure, the next two clubs that we're going to talk about, Perth Glory and Newcastle Jets, it was very tough to actually find nominees. They have had great goalkeepers in their time, but some of those goalkeepers had better periods at other clubs, which becomes a challenge. First one up is Jason Petkovic. He was the captain of Perth Glory from their inaugural season through to 2009, 31 games for them during that period, 16 Australian national team appearances, though most of those actually came through in the NSL era, where he was also a very, very good very good goalkeeper and player. You can see from this picture here, this is his retirement match in 2008-2009 season. A very good keeper at the time, but again, perhaps not as strong. I would put him maybe in the decent category because he was quite good in those early seasons, but he didn't win anything. He didn't have that longevity that some of the others have. Any thoughts on Jason Petkovic and where we should sit him?
No, I think decent's fine. We're specifically talking about the A-League here as opposed to contributions throughout the NSL. So I think as far as an A-League goalkeeper goes, decent. If we were to include Perth Glory's history as a whole, including those NSL appearances, I think he goes to very good. But given that it's simply the league as a whole here, not to, as Simon Hill puts it, discount our Australian football history. But we are specifically talking about the league here, so it's got to be decent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel qualified to talk about the NSL history. I don't know how many people out there would, but I'm sure they'll let us know in the comment section below if we've got that one wrong. Jumping forward to another keeper for Perth Glory, the current custodian over in WA, Liam Reddy. Now, Liam Reddy's kind of a fascinating one because he doesn't have the best winning record as far as the teams are concerned. He has played, as you've already mentioned, for quite a few of the teams in the division, Central Coast, Newcastle Jets, right back at the inaugural seasons of the A-League. He is one of the longest serving players in the division itself, and I think potentially will make the appearance record before he eventually retires. He was a substitute in the 2016, 2017 and 2018, 2019 team of the year, so twice the backup player on the bench. Most clean sheets in 2005, 2006, that inaugural year of the A-League in his time at Newcastle. Again in 2018, 2019 in Perth's championship winning year, and again in 2019, 2020 last season. At a time when Perth perhaps wasn't performing all that well, still got 12 clean sheets for the season. He is the joint all-time clean sheets record holder with 85. If he gets a single clean sheet this season, he will take out that title entirely, though that is potential that the person he shares that record with comes back later on in his career. What are some of your thoughts on Liam Reddy? He's kind of meme-worthy a little bit because he does have that occasional tendency to just dribble the ball up the field for no reason through traffic, and he does occasionally drop a clanger. But at his best, a very, very good goalkeeper and a very important part of the most recent Perth Glory Championship win.
Yeah, I think he goes into the very good category. As you mentioned, he is quite prone to brain snaps, or in the case of was it the 17-18 season, the last game of the season, thinking that he's playing FIFA and running the ball up and leaving the net completely empty. Had an absolute shocker in last season's semi-final against Sydney FC, where he just completely mistimed his run. Those are the things that probably stop him from hitting that all-star category. But that's part of what makes Liam Reddy so fun, is exactly what he contributes to the league, which is why he ranks so highly. I'd say it's very good. If he got rid of those clangers from his game, he probably goes into All-Star. The stats certainly suggested, but the fact that he has he has those aspects of his game stop him from being regarded as one of the greatest keepers in the A-League history.
I mean, they always say that goalkeepers are a little bit eccentric and a little bit weird. He certainly does some strange things on the field. He's one for the neutral. Like we probably love watching him at Perth, but if we were a Perth fan, we'd probably rip our hair out at some of the things that he does on a football pitch. I've dropped him in between Philip Curto and Andrew Redmayne in the very good category. Do you think that's an alright spot to sit him, right in the middle of that group?
Yep, that's fair.
Perfect. All right, jumping forward to the next goalkeeper. This is Mark Birighitti. Now, full disclosure, you and I had a discussion off-screen about how we were going to position the Newcastle Jets, and there were kind of two ways that we looked at it. It was really between Mark Birighitti and Ben Kennedy and one other goalkeeper that we'll talk about in a moment as to who was the best Newcastle keeper in the history of the division. Obviously, Ante Kovic was their championship winning keeper. We've already spoken about him with Western Sydney Wanderers. Mark Birighitti, I've given him the edge because he was the substitute goalkeeper in the 2015-2016 Team of the Year while at Newcastle, which I think is a slightly better achievement. Ben Kennedy was the other one that we discussed. He did win the title in that group in 2007-2008, but he was a premier and a champion, making 0 appearances in that season. So even though he has those trophies and he probably has that medal, I didn't think it was necessarily reflective of where he sat as far as Newcastle's best is concerned, because he didn't really play at any point throughout that season when they won it. Mark Birighitti is a tough one to rank as well. Obviously now with Central Coast Mariners, was a very promising young goalkeeper before going overseas to Swansea in the UK. Came back and hasn't necessarily gotten back into his footing, spent a brief period at Melbourne City where he couldn't get into the first team, and now at Central Coast where he's in, to be fair, a very, very poor team, even outside of his own performances. Where do you think we position someone like Mark Birighitti, given that he's 27, 28 and potentially has a few years left in the division?
I'd say he fits in the decent category. He shows enough talent there. We're going to talk about the Mariners a little bit further, obviously, and there is a name on the list for the Mariners that be forward to go there, just simply because of that other name. Spoiler alert, it's a big name, so stay tuned. As you said, he's been in a poor Central Coast side in recent memory. Through no fault of his own, he's conceded a lot of goals. There's not many goalkeepers in the league who would be able to do well with that defense in front of them. So I'd say decent is an apt place for Mark Birighitti.
Yeah, he's a fascinating kind of like sliding doors moment because he came back to the league around a similar time that Redmayne moved across to Sydney FC. I think Birighitti's the better goalkeeper on like pure talent and ability alone. So it's so fascinating to think what would have happened if maybe Birighitti had to come back to Sydney instead of going to Melbourne City around that period, and where would they be and where would he be positioned in the league itself. But who knows, maybe he does get himself a move to a bigger club. He did play at Adelaide a little bit early on in his career. Newcastle and Central Coast have said maybe he's the guy that eventually ends up back at Adelaide to try and solve their goalkeeping issues with a departure that we'll talk about further in a little bit. Another one that I've nominated is Ivan Nesevsky. Now, full disclosure, I'm probably being a little bit biased here. Nesevsky was a long-time backup goalkeeper, did start for a little while at the Newcastle Jets. I think he was in the Newcastle Jets in the original season of the A-League. He was a champion as a backup goalkeeper with Sydney FC in 2009-2010 and a premier in 2009-2010, making 2 appearances during that season. Puts him just a little bit ahead of Ben Kennedy for me. And full disclosure, I did also meet him outside of a McDonald's in the first season of the A-League. Down here in Melbourne, I think Melbourne and Sydney FC played out a 0-0 draw. Afterwards, went to McDonald's after a night out and just randomly happened to run into about 5 or 6 Sydney FC players. And he was the nicest guy I think I've ever met as far as professional athletes are concerned. So, top dude. But, I have to acknowledge that bias and get it out there early. Do you have any memories of Ivan Nesevsky in the league itself? Probably more recently in his time at Newcastle before dropping back down into the NPL. I don't think we could position him. Yeah, I don't think we could position him above decent. But he did win the league, so maybe we kind of drop him behind Birighitti in terms of that overall individual award and that sort of thing. And it does. Yeah, actually,
I'd say bottom of the decent category.
Bottom of the decent category. That's fine with me, mate. I can absolutely go along with that. Next one, and this is probably going to be one that you can reminisce on a little bit more fondly. It is Danny Vukovic, who of course had a long career in the division with Central Coast Mariners, Newcastle Jets, Perth Glory, Melbourne Victory, Sydney FC, has completed nearly the set as far as the Australian sides in the A-League are concerned, was the A-League goalkeeper in the 2016-2017 season, made the Team of the Year that same year, was a substitute in the Team of the Year in 2009, 2010, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. In his time at Perth, had the most clean sheets in a single season in the 2011-2012 season with Perth. Again, had the most clean sheets in a single season in 2015-2016 with Melbourne Victory. That record still remains. Nobody has gotten anywhere near the 15 clean sheets that he got that year. The closest anyone's gotten is 12. And he's the joint all-time clean sheet holder with 85. Currently playing over in Belgium. If he comes back to the league, there is potential he'll get there. But him and Liam Reddy sitting right next to each other. Obviously, he did play at Sydney FC as well. What were some of your thoughts on his time with the Sydney FC and on his overall career and where he sits as a whole?
Okay, so we've already mentioned the Sydney FC bias on my part. Full disclosure here, I met Vukovic that season after a game. I actually have a wonderful photo with him that I was able to get. I was holding his baby boy. Nicest bloke in the world. I don't think there's anyone who'd ever actually say a bad word about him, apart from maybe a referee. If we reflect back to his time at the Central Coast, that cost him a spot in the Olympics with that red card in the grand final. He's one of the top goalkeepers at the A-League scene. He's rightly playing in Belgium at the moment. Unfortunately did suffer an injury over there. Is kind of the third choice keeper at the moment for the Socceroos. It's just a testament to his level of talent. Personally, I hope that we don't see him back in the A-League. I think that he deserves the opportunity to finish his career in Europe. But maybe he comes back. He's certainly got a number of clubs to choose from. I think any club would be instantly improved by having him in their goalkeeping ranks. I'd say he goes to that all-star category, but we'll put him at the bottom of the all-star category because there will be some players ahead of him that we'll get to soon.
Yeah, look, I'll put him ahead of Ante Kovic. I think Ante Kovic goes in the all-star category, but his greatest achievements aren't in the A-League itself. They're with an A-League side, but in the Champions League. I think the fact that he's done so much and won so much with different teams, and he was at Wellington as well. I should mention that before Wellington fans start firing off in the comment section or over on Twitter. He's won stuff with Perth, with Victory, with Sydney, and has been involved in like substitute Team of the Year appearances with Wellington and Perth as well. So I think he kind of deserves it. The point that you made about him not coming back, yeah, I do want to see players getting full long careers in Europe, but it would not shock me. He's 34 years of age now, as you've mentioned, coming back from a big injury as well. It wouldn't shock me if we get him back at like 36, 37 and sees out his final years like as a professional in his home country. There's always those quality of life things that we spoke about with some of the international keepers. I think you quite often see it with Australian players as well, looking to kind of close out their remaining years in the A-League season. If it doesn't happen, doesn't happen. That's absolutely fine. He had quite a distinguished career. I think we put him ahead of Kovic just based on the A-League achievements that he's got. They're pretty much,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
He's won pretty much everything. Like there's no, he's been a premier, he's been a champion, he's been a keeper of the year, he's got all-time records that still stand to this day. I think we put him just ahead for the time being. Another one, and this one's going to be trickier for us to rank, Lawrence Thomas. Now, he was a Joe Master medal winner in 2018, one of two goalkeepers to win that award for best player on the pitch in the grand final, was a premier in 2014-2015, a champion in 2014-2015 and 2017-2018, which is that photo you can see of him there, winning that award, pretty much single-handedly thwarting Newcastle Jets away from home a lot of the time, and he won an FFA Cup in 2015. Did most recently make the jump over to Europe itself, where so far he's doing quite well for his team in Norway. I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I'll absolutely butcher it. What are some of your thoughts on Lawrence Thomas, his time at the Victory? Obviously trying to put aside our relative Melbourne City and Sydney FC biases. And where do you think he sits in a discussion for best keepers in the A-League?
I can't put aside the bias for this one, but that will make sense. Lawrence Thomas is one of those players that I absolutely would have loved to have seen on the other side of Big Blue and playing for Sydney FC. The level of talent that he has, the frustration that he has caused Sydney FC fans on occasion. He's one of those players that you love to hate, but if he was playing for your team, you'd fall in love with him. He has had a couple of shockers here and there. The 2018 grand final that whole final series, I try to erase from memory, like it didn't happen. I think part of his performance can go down to that VAR error, just because if Newcastle Jets aren't chasing the game for 80 odd minutes, he probably doesn't get the chance to have such a good performance because he's constantly having to be on his toes to stop the equaliser. But other than that, yeah, I'd say he belongs in the very good category.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd put top of very good, and on his day, yeah, I'd acknowledge the same thing. He's a massive pain in the ass for anyone who's on the other side of the opposition fence. But yeah, like quality of performances are there. He's got pretty much everything that you can win in the A-League, with the exception of being goalkeeper of the year. He hasn't won that at any point in his career. Still only 25, so there is potential that he does come back to the league later in his career if things don't work out in Europe, but so far so good for him. And he's a Bankstown boy, so you might have just been a little bit, prescient and looked into the future and seen him coming back to Sydney FC or one of the Sydney sides when he does make the return to Australia. I also shared a train line with him, and he seemed like a relatively nice dude. Just caught the train into Victory Training into Richmond each day, and I think he carried like a briefcase with him with all of his stuff in it, whatever else. So yeah, we'll go top of very good, and I don't think he's in the all-star category because I think some of the other keepers that we're still going to get to as well have won quite a bit more. But yeah, definitely I think top of very good is a fair enough reflection of his ability on his day.
Yeah, if he goes to the Wanderers, then that'll just cap it up. He'll be the most hated player in Sydney, guaranteed. If he goes to the Wanderers, he will become the most hated player as far as the Sydney FC fans are concerned if he goes to the Wanderers.
I guess that depends if the Wanderers start winning when he goes to the Wanderers. I think that's a big part of it as well. The next one, and we had to include him, we could not leave him out. It's Mark Bosnich. Made 4 appearances for Central Coast Mariners as injury replacement in 2008 as part of, as you already mentioned, Danny Vukovic's red card suspension that cost him a spot in the Olympics. He was out for 8 months, some of which eventually got reduced and suspended. He's the Oceanic Footballer of the Century from 1999, Oceanic Team of the Century in 2000, 17 Australian national team appearances, which to be honest seems a little bit low to me given how long he was over there in the Premier Division itself. I had to include him. I couldn't not include him. Have a look at the photo. It just sums everything up about Mark Bosnich as a person. Obviously a long-time pundit and supporter of the A-League from a media perspective. I don't think we can position him that high on this list, to be completely honest, because he's only made those 4 appearances. But what are some of your thoughts on Mark Bosnich's contribution to the A-League itself? And where do you think we should sit him?
Okay, so I did mention earlier that there was a little bit of discussion off screen regarding the Mariners, and the player I was talking about was Mark Bosnich. It's a big name, and don't get me wrong, he deserves to be talked about. But as far as his actual league contributions go, for the Mariners, I said, look, I think it's Birighitti, but we've put him under as Newcastle Jet. Look, for everything that Bosnich has done for the league as a pundit, regardless of whatever you think of him, he's always trying to promote the A-League, and that can only be a good thing. But that's his punditry. You mentioned his Socceroo appearances. Through no fault of his own, he's behind Mark Schwarzer, and you put Mark Schwarzer forward. Give me a choice of those 2 keepers. I'm taking Schwarzer all day, every day. And I don't think there'd be many people who disagree. He did come back to the A-League out of retirement.
I think here's what I'll suggest, right? I think out of respect for his punditry, I think he goes to the top of getting the bin, but I don't think we put him above getting the bin. As far as A-League contribution is concerned, absolutely not. Like, had a good career not a good career because he did a bunch of cocaine and got sacked, but at Manchester United and Aston Villa and Chelsea over in the UK. So in his prime, one of the best that we've ever had in the country. But yeah, A-League contributions, you can see just from that photo the kind of shape that he was in during that period. He was very much just filling in and doing them a favour more than anything else. So I think top of getting the bin for his contributions to the league off the pitch. But yeah, I think as far as on the field goes, there's not too much more we could say to him. There are people in the bin that have more appearances in the league than he does, so it wouldn't be fair necessarily on them to put him too much higher in the list. And I think it also segues nicely into probably one of the best keepers that we've seen in the division, the current national team goalkeeper, Matt Ryan. This phenomenal photo that you can see here from his celebratory woo after the Central Coast Grand Final win. Sit tight for this one for a second, Steve, because A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2011-2012, A-League Young Player of the Year in 2010-2011, and 2011-2012, the only player to ever win that multiple times and in successive years. The Harry Kewell Medal for the Best Australian Under-23 Player in 2012 during his time at Central Coast Mariners. He did win it, in brackets, 2 further times in 2014 and 2015 for Club Bruges. Just goes to show how young he was when he got all these achievements. Was a champion in 2013 with the Central Coast Mariners, was the Premier in 2011-2012 with the Central Coast Mariners. That same season won the Joe Marston Medal in 2011, had the most clean sheets in the division in 2011-2012 and 2012-2013, a 59-time Australian national team player and counting, potentially going to be our captain once we resume international friendlies as well. Just a phenomenal player for the league, phenomenal player for the Central Coast. He harkens back to their most successful period. I'm a huge rat for Matt Ryan. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And I think I'd already put him out as our second best ever goalkeeper, just behind Mark Schwarzer and ahead of Mark Bosnich. What are some of your thoughts on him, and where do you think we sit him in this list?
He's straight to the top of the list. You've said everything there is to say about Matty Ryan. There was that issue early on where he looked like he wasn't going to fill out, just in terms of his frame, and then he filled out and just became, the first choice keeper for the Socceroos. His first choice keeper is Brighton. He's, I think, and I could be wrong, I think he's with the departure of Moy, he's the only Aussie playing in the Premier League at the moment. He just seems to improve every time he steps onto the pitch. The only thing that might go against him is that he seems to be having a couple of problems at Brighton at the moment. But that could just be some backroom stuff that just needs to get sorted out. I don't think that takes away at all from his on-field ability. If we're looking simply at the league, he's I'd say top 3 goalkeepers that the league's ever seen, and that he. Yeah, as far as we currently go, he deserves to be top of the list.
It's mind-blowing to me that everything that we just read about his A-League achievements took place before the age of 21 when he moved overseas, which is absolutely crazy. He achieved more in 3 seasons in the A-League than I think most people have in their entire careers, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But yeah...
the league gets a rap for not developing the youth properly.
Yeah, I know. But I think he's one of those exceptional circumstances where it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered where he was. He was going to work his way into first-team football. The interesting part you mentioned was that him not filling out his frame. He actually had the opportunity to move to Tottenham and did a trial with them after I think his first season in the A-League, and they were worried that at the time he was like 5'9" and wasn't going to be tall enough to play in the Premier League, and then eventually obviously came back, did quite well, took the long route through Europe, in Belgium and then Spain for a little bit with Valencia, and then made his jump over to Brighton where he's done quite well and been their starting goalkeeper. Graham Potter hates Australians apparently, selling Aaron Moy and now apparently wanting to sell Matt Ryan, but hopefully he lands on his feet at another Premier Division club because he's more than capable. And given that he is still, I think, 27, 28, a long time ahead of him to continue playing for both the Socceroos and potentially, if his career goes to absolute shit, come back to the A-League and hopefully join either of our clubs because he'd be an absolute asset to any team that he joins.
Yeah, I think he will absolutely find a place in the Premier League should he get the sack from Brighton at the end of the season. I think there's a lot of teams that would be absolutely lining up. I can see a few of the top 6 clubs going after him as a backup, but he's not a backup. He's a starting keeper. He needs to be getting game time, and he's not going to get that at any of the top 6 clubs, barring some massive transfers out. He's not going to go ahead of what's the name of the Manchester United kid? Not De Gea, the kid. Henderson, yeah. He's not going to go ahead of Henderson, who's the future for United. He's not going to go ahead of Bernd Leno. He's not going to go ahead of Hugo Lloris. He's not going to go ahead of any of the 3 keepers that Chelsea has to choose from, whose names all escape me at the moment.
Yeah.
He's not going to go ahead of Alisson.
Yeah, so I don't think he's going to make... I don't even think he'd go to a top 6 club, to be honest. I think he makes smarter moves than that. I think everywhere he's gone knowing that he's going to play and knowing that he's going to be a starter. But I could definitely see him going to, a team that's consistently in the top 10.
A West Ham, Burnley and Everton, he's
a
going
Newcastle.
to fit in very well there.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
that's where
A Newcastle or a Southampton, I think, is a good shout at the moment for how they're travelling. A Leeds would be absolutely perfect for him. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. And I think he's more than happy to go to other European nations as well, given the trajectory of his career. I don't think he's particularly fussed as long as he's playing football. So yeah, we hope the best for him. We hope it all works out. We do jump.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing quickly. You did mention other European clubs. Now, this might be a little bit of a stretch. I'd like to see him go to Barcelona, spend a year as a backup to Ter Stegen, and then take over the starting job. I think that would be a very good place for him. He'd consistently been playing Champions League football. He's shown that he can hang with the best teams in the Premier League. La Liga would become a little bit of a walk for him. Barcelona look like they're going to be starting a rebuild, so Ter Stegen gets a final year, and then Matt Ryan is a successor to that, and he has 5 or 6 good years in La Liga. So I think that could be a good place for him.
Look, I don't want to shoot it down. I would love to see it happening, but his time at Valencia wasn't that great, and the Valencia side that he played in wasn't fantastic. So I don't think he'd be on Barcelona's radar, but it wouldn't be the craziest transfer I've ever seen. It could happen in Football Manager, so it can happen anywhere. So, yeah, we'll see how that one plays out over the next few years. And if he ends up at Barcelona, Stephen, you get all the credit in the world, and everybody call your bookmakers now and get that bet down for his next one. Jumping forward now to the Brisbane Roar, we're going to have a look at Jamie Young. Obviously still in the league. It took him a while to actually become a starting goalkeeper in the division, was a second choice for quite a few years. Was the Hyundai A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2017-2018, and did make the Team of the Year in both 2017-2018 and the most recent 19-20 season, despite not winning the Goalkeeper of the Year award. Hasn't got any trophies to his name, has been at Brisbane since really kind of they've dropped away from the title scene. We will talk about some of the players that are still at that level or were there during that time in a moment. What are some of your thoughts on Jamie Young as one of the premier keepers in the division, and where do you think he sits on this list?
Okay, so Jamie Young is one of those players who he's not in the Lawrence Thomas category of I absolutely hate him because of the teams he's played for, but he's in that category of he's one of those keepers that when he's playing against your team, you absolutely hate him. If he was playing for your team, you'd absolutely love him. He's a very good, solid keeper. He doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves to an extent. I think that if you look at the top 3 keepers in the league last year, I think it goes Redmayne, Young, Izzo, and we will be getting onto Paul Izzo in a moment. I think that Jamie Young has had a solid career and he's going to continue to have a solid career. He'd be a good number 1 for any team in the league. And personally, I would like to see him at Sydney, but I don't think he gets ahead of Redmayne at the moment. But that could also just be my Sydney bias coming into play.
He's 35 as well. I don't think he's necessarily going to make jumps anywhere else. I'll put him at the top of very good. I'll put him just behind Lawrence Thomas. But what I'm thinking, just while we're here, I think Clint Bolton goes ahead of both of them, given that he has won the division and has a bit more of a record in terms of overall trophies and competitions won in the league, just on our metric. But yeah, I think just behind that, and he is one of the better keepers in the division as it currently stands. One keeper that's perhaps Brisbane's best ever, though, is Michael Theokotos, now known as Michael Theo, that late name change after he came back into the division. A-League Goalkeeper of the Year in 2006, 2007 and 2007-2008 with victory. Again, with Brisbane in the 2010-2011 season. Made the Team of the Year for the A-League itself in 2010-2011. Was a substitute in the Team of the Year in 2008-2009 in his time with the victory. Was the substitute goalkeeper in the A-League Team of the Decade, which was basically representing all of the A-League throughout the years 2005 through to 2015. Was an A-League champion in 2006-2007, 2008-2009 with the victory. 3 in a row, 2010, 11, 11, 12 and 13, 14 with Brisbane. The most championships of any player in the A-League history. He was a premier in 2006, 2007 and 2008, 2009 with the victory. 2010, 2011, 2013, 2014 with Brisbane. Those 4 premierships are again the most of any player in the division. He holds the record still to this day and has for the last 7 years of the longest time without conceding, 876 consecutive minutes during his time at Brisbane. He has the most clean sheets in 2006, 2007 and 2008, 2009 with the victory, and he's the 4th in all-time clean sheets despite retiring 5 years ago. What are some of your thoughts on Michael Theokotos? Do you remember him from that peak period of Brisbane? And where do you think, based on his list, we would sit him in this tier list?
Okay, so I don't remember Michael Theo per se, but you've just rattled off all the achievements. You've rattled off a couple of stats. He's all I've seen of him is highlights and replays of matches on YouTube and the like. So I wasn't, around him or exposed to him, I should say, during the peak of his career. As far as everything goes, he's an all-star keeper. We're going to talk about one more name when it comes to Adelaide. Honestly, tossing up between the other player that we're going to talk about and Michael Theo as far as the best keeper that the league has ever seen. Like I said, top three. I mentioned Matt Ryan there, top three. He's third. As tossing up between Michael Theo and the other keeper for 1 and 2.
Let's put him at the top for now, and then maybe we'll come back to Theo a little bit further when we get to that last goalkeeper. No future spoilers. I'm sure people can figure it out pretty quickly if they use their heads. But jumping forward now to Adelaide United, their two nominees, the first of which is Paul Izzo, substitute in the 2019-2020 Team of the Year this past season, a three-time FFA Cup winner, the most of any player, with 2014 wins, 2018 and 2019 with Adelaide United. Was a starting goalkeeper at Adelaide United very early in his career, made the jump to Central Coast, where he impressed quite a few in a poor side, and has been back at Adelaide for 5 seasons. Just made the jump over to second division in Greece with Tony Popovic's Xanthi the Revolution. So he has just left the league, but a decent contribution. Most of his success, though, more in the FFA Cup than the A-League itself. Where do you think we sit Paul Izzo on this list?
Paul Izzo goes into the very good category. I don't think he goes quite to the top. I'd say somewhere in the middle of the pack there.
Maybe just ahead of Sorensen, but behind Jamie Young?
Yep, I'd say that's a fair place to put him. I have the number here in front of me, bear with me. So in the 2018-19 season, at just 23 years of age, he played every single minute of every single game in the league for Adelaide United. 2,430 minutes, which was the most by any youth player in that particular season. He has done tremendous things in his short time in the A-League. You mentioned it. He's gone on to Xanthi in Greece. That will get him some European exposure. But I don't know exactly where the second division of the Greek league sits in terms of being on people's radars or its quality relative to the A-League. But given the exodus that we've seen of A-League talent to that particular club, because of the Australian connections, if there's anything to go by based on what we've seen in the league, he's gonna do well there, as will the rest of the Australian talent, and might put some more Australian talent on the radar in terms of moves to some higher European clubs that are in some countries' top divisions. I look at the Eredivisie there. That level of club, not necessarily top 5, but that tier just below it. They could see Australians get more exposure in Europe. I think the top of the very good. Sorry, not the top. Between Jamie Young and Thomas Sorensen, the very good category, I think, is an apt place for Paul Izzo.
Yeah, I think the Xanthi thing is interesting because they're in Division 2. Like, those players will need... Brillante's in there, German's in there, Callan Elliott's in there, and a couple others from in and around the division. That will be very interesting to see. They have to go up pretty much straight away, and then they have to do well in the top division in Turkey, which is a challenge given the size and strength of some of the sides around that level. But, you would want to see it doing well. We hope for all of our international Socceroos, regardless of what clubs they've come from, that they do well and get more, build that better pathway. The challenge is Turkey's very volatile, like in terms of their coaching structures. I know it's half owned by one of the Sydney Olympic owners, but the other half of it could still be, that crazy kind of level of Turkish owner that fires managers during pre-season or during games and whatever else. We've seen it happen to Popovic once already over in that part of the world. I don't think they have the greatest level of patience, and I'm not sure if they'll accept anything other than coming straight back up this year. But we hope it goes well for Izzo. He's a good goalkeeper. And as you mentioned, still relatively young, so he could always have the A-League to come back to if he needs to.
Sorry, just quickly, you mean Greece, not Turkey?
Yeah, sorry, Greece. Apologies. I said Turkey.
I can understand exactly where you had Turkey on your mind given Popovic, but yeah, I'd say, like, in terms of the level, that the Greece and Turkish leagues are both relatively similar. They're kind of that, I guess you'd put them in that third tier of European clubs. Like, so you've got the top 5 leagues, obviously. Then you've got your leagues like the Eredivisie, the Belgium League, and then you've probably got the Turkish League, the Greece League below that, just because of the volatility in that part of the world and the crazy owners who demand success almost immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I was running that reference back to Popovic's first stint in Europe, but even then, like I think once they go up into the top tier, like PAOK's a big club, Panathinaikos is a big club, Olympiakos, huge clubs that kind of they're dominant as far as like Champions League qualification spots and Europa League qualification spots are concerned. So hopefully they can get themselves back up, get themselves a platform to try and get themselves in the shop window for a lot of those other clubs around the divisions that you said, because I think there's also an expectation for a lot of A-League players that their move overseas will be to a top 5, top 6 nation, when in reality it's probably going to be like a 7th through to 12th nation, and then you kind of build up from there, and getting yourself consistent minutes is the big thing. I think the good thing for Izzo and his move is that he will be the first choice goalkeeper next season, and he has got a coach there that knows who he is and his quality and ability. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for him. We now head on to our last...
Just quickly, maybe he gets scouted by one of those clubs you mentioned, like an Olympiakos or a PAOK, who are able to give him first division minutes in Greece next season, and that puts him on the radar. So, and maybe some of the other Australian talent at Xanthi, cop the same thing, get that exposure to the top clubs, show their talent that we've seen throughout their A-League, throughout their time in the A-League, and able to use this as a platform to go on to better things, which is what I think the logic is for a lot of people. I mentioned the mass exodus. The other one was India, but India's not exactly going to put everyone on the radar, whereas, they actually have a half decent shout at Xanthi of getting put on the radar of some of the bigger clubs.
Yeah, and if he does well, like it opens up the shop window for the A-League as a recruitment platform. Like if he does well there, then the other sides in and around Europe, in and around Greece, wherever else might look at it and say, okay, there's quality players in the A-League that just need to be given an opportunity, or that we can get at cut price deals compared to other nations around the world. I thought for a split second you were going to say he puts himself in the shop window and goes to Real Madrid and we get a Paul Izzo, Matt Ryan Super Classico, but we'll see if that plays out over the next few years as well. Now we have mentioned this guy a couple of times now. I think you've alluded to him, I've alluded to him as well. Eugene Galekovic, you can see him here holding the toilet seat high above his head. Sit tight for a second, Stephen, because we've got a bit to fire through. A-League Goalkeeper of the Year 2008-2009, 2009-2010, 2013-2014, and 2014-2015. The Team of the Year 2008-2009, 2009-2010, 2013-2014, 2014-2015. The Substitute Goalkeeper in the 2012-2013 Team of the Year. A-League Team of the Decade starting goalkeeper for those first 10 years in the A-League itself. He was a champion in 2006-2007 with Melbourne Victory, again with Adelaide in 2015-2016, which is the picture you can see there. A Premier in 2006-2007 with Victory, and again 2015-2016 with Adelaide. Won the FFA Cup in 2014, had the most clean sheets in the competition at 2015-2016. Third in the all-time clean sheets record with 83, some distance between him and the fourth choice player. 8 national team appearances. Adelaide United club legend, came back to Melbourne City for a little bit towards the end of his career and has now returned to Adelaide as a goalkeeping coach. What are some of your thoughts on Eugene Galekovic and what he's brought to the league over the course of his history?
Okay, so I was able to see a little bit of Galekovic towards the back end of his career. Again, you watch highlights, watch replays of matches, YouTube, Fox Sports, wherever you find A-League content. Everyone always holds him in such high regard, and as you look at it simply from a stats perspective, from an achievements perspective, he goes straight to the top of the All-Star list as well. Now, I did mention a few minutes ago that that top 3 of Matt Ryan, and I was really tossing up hard as to whether it's Michael Theo or Eugene Galekovic for me. I don't think putting them in either spot is wrong, and I think it comes down to personal preference. I think it goes to Eugene Galekovic for me, just because I actually got to see Galekovic play, as opposed to Michael Theo. That's not a knock on Michael Theo in any way, shape, or form. It's just simply my personal preference.
So here's how I'll do it, right? This is kind of becoming a comparison now between what is more important, your club achievements or your individual achievements, because Michael Theoklitos won more in terms of being involved. They were actually both in the inaugural seasons of the A-League, the first 2 years, the first choice and backup goalkeeper, and they rotated those positions quite a bit. Couldn't quite decide if Galekovic or Theoklitos was going to start. Eventually it went to Theoklitos, and then Goalkeepers made the move to Adelaide, where he spent pretty much the remainder of his career. We won't talk about his spell at Melbourne City. Then Theocritos went overseas to Norwich, had a horrific time, lost 5-0 on his debut in his one appearance for the club. His next game, he was dropped, so he arrived an hour late to the stadium. He says it was just a mistake on his part. He got his clocks wrong, but, kind of spat the dummy a little bit, came back, and then was part of that phenomenal Ange Postecoglou Brisbane Roar side that won quite a few divisions during that period. But at the same time, when there were discussions during that period, while both players were in the league and in their prime, it was always Goalkeepers ahead of him in the team of the season and ahead of him in terms of goalkeeper of the year. And I think the big differentiating factor, the A-League team of the season, or team of the decade, Goalkeepers started and Theocritos didn't. Even though Theocritos has the bigger awards, Goalkeepers has more goalkeeper of the year awards, has been involved in the league and a long competition. My preference is Goalkeepers as well, to back you up. But that's mainly because I just hated playing against him. Every time he rocked up to Amy Park, you knew he was going to be tough to beat. It was usually a clean sheet for Adelaide, or worst case scenario, he'd get something wriggle past his way, but it was very rarely his fault. And I think the quality of defence that he had in front of him wasn't always as good as what Theocritos had during his key years. So I would also advocate for Goalkeepers going to the top of the pile as the best keeper that we've seen thus far. But having said that, the top five, Goalkeepers, Theocritos, Ryan, Vukovic, and Kovic, all of them quality, all of them on their day. There's no one in there that's like head and shoulders above everybody else, because on their best day, all of them are absolutely phenomenal talents throughout the course of the league.
Yep. You mentioned the defense in front of Theocritos. The other thing that he has going for him, being part of that, that dynasty Brisbane squad, was the attack in front of him as well, where it wouldn't have necessarily mattered if he, let one or two in. Not that he did, but if he had you've got the players, you've got Barisha and Bush in front of him who are going to stick it in the back of the net, and they're the sort of team that very easily could have won, 5-4, 4-3 sorts of games just because of the attacking talent they had if the defense wasn't up to par. Not that it was, the defense was, quite good, and it was really, probably the best all-rounded squad we've seen in the A-League at the moment. Sydney are fighting for it, with the performance over the last few seasons. But given the talent that's come in and out of that Sydney squad, I still think, and the fact that Brisbane did the Invincibles campaign, thanks Wanderers for stopping Sydney from doing that. I think there's, Michael Theo has his place in league's history. He's not going to go anywhere anytime soon in terms of that. I think it's, as I said, it's one of those personal preference things as to whether you go Goalkeepers or Theo.
Yeah, I don't think and by all means, people will probably let us know in the comment section below if they disagree with any of the positions we've done, and we'll put up the link to people to put up their own list and see how they compare. I think there's always going to be bias that comes in for it with like who do you support and who do you follow and who have you had the most exposure to. Like Adelaide fans are always going to say Goalkeepers. Theocritos will probably be the representative of a lot of Brisbane fans. Matt Ryan was phenomenal for Central Coast. Like I think that comes into it as well. But the reality is, regardless of where you sat in the league, the couple that we've gone through, the elite tier, they are the tippy top. I don't think anyone's going to come back and say that they are unworthy of their positions. But we will revisit them just quickly. The bin category: Mark Bosnich, Justin Passfield, Jared Tyson, Nick Suman, Jess Van Stratton, Sebastian Usai, Danny Milosevic, and Michael Turnbull. Anyone there that you think we've been too harsh on and need to move up?
The only one I think you could argue being harsh for is Bosnich, but that's more because of his punditry work as opposed to what he's actually done in the league, which is why we put him at the top again in the bin. As I was running through the discussion with him, I was tossing up between the two. But as far as his actual league appearances goes, it's off the 10. See you later. Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the decent category, we've got Birigidi, Petkovic, Lopa, Glover, Federici, Scott, and Nesevsky. Anyone there that you think needs to move up or down?
No, I think that's a solid list. I think everyone there is in the place they deserve. The one you could make a case for is Federici, but we'd be looking at his historical achievements as opposed to what he's actually done in the league so far. If we revisit this list at the end of the season, then absolutely, I think you could make a case if he performs well. But as it currently stands right now, decent is where he belongs.
Yeah, I'll move up towards the top of the decent list with Birigidi, just so they're alongside each other there. Very good category. We've got Clint Bolton, Lawrence Thomas, Jamie Young, Paul Izzo, Thomas Sorensen, Philip Curto, Liam Reddy, Andrew Redmayne, Mark Paston, and Glenn Moss. Anyone there that you think needs to move up or down?
No, I think everyone there is fine. They've got into their spot on merit. We did mention when it comes to Liam Reddy and Andrew Redmayne that they could make the step up in Reddy's case if he didn't have those brain snap aspects to his game, and Redmayne may prove over the next few years, given the fact he's only in his early 30s, that he deserves to go to the top of that list. But for now, given all the context around it, I don't think you can make a case for him to go into that all-star category.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then our top 5, Galekovic, Theokritos, Ryan, Vukovic, and Kovic. Anyone up there that you think we need to maybe adjust the order on or isn't in the correct spot?
No, I think that Matt Ryan, I think it's fitting that he's at 3. We've already mentioned why, and I think Matt Ryan provides that perfect separator between the elite of the elite in terms of the elite goalkeeping category, which is Galekovic and Theo, and kind of like the Vukovic, Ante Kovic. I think Matty Ryan provides a good separator point. I think Vukovic and Kovic, you could make a case for swapping them, but I don't think there's too much of a differential between them. Given that we are focusing on the league, Vukovic's league achievements heavily outweigh that of Kovic. But again, that Asian Champions League achievement does count for something, given Australian teams' relative inability to do well in that particular competition. So I don't think that anything needs to change there either.
Yeah, I'd agree. Look, I think this is clearly the definitive list, and whenever future historians want to look back, this is the one. This is it. There's no room for error in any way. Now, by all means, if people disagree, let us know in the comment section below. We will put the link in there as well to make your own tier lists over on Tiermaker. You can also let us know on Twitter how you think and feel about this particular group. Stephen, that does bring us to the end. I do love chatting football with you, and we probably could have gone for 2 or 3 hours longer if we really kind of set our minds to it, but I think we found a happy spot. If people want to check out more of your content or follow your social media or anything like that, where's the best place to find you?
So the best place to find me is on Twitter, at Paletti Stephen. I do have some other stuff, but it's not football related, but I do post about it quite a bit on Twitter. So if you're interested, feel free to follow the links that I post things on Twitter. That's really the only place you can find me on socials.
Yeah, for sure. And all of Stephen's content on the reserveteam.com.au and the link to his Twitter will be in the description below if you want to go and check that stuff out. From myself, though, from Stephen, thank you guys so much for watching along with us. If you want to help support the channel, you can drop a like on this video. Gets us higher in YouTube search results when people look for Australian and New Zealand football content. You can also subscribe to the channel to get us a little bit closer to getting that custom URL, that 100 mark that we're trying to hit, and also to be kept up to date on all of our future videos, which will continue to release as we build towards the A-League and W-League seasons. More than anything, though, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you all again next time.